Buongiorno a tutti, benvenuti. Un saluto subito al professor David LEISER, nostro ospite con cui inizia questa giornata del Festival dell'Economia, giornata anche della Festa della Repubblica, e che è una data che naturalmente ricordiamo in modo particolare ora, affrontando sia tutto il tema che abbiamo affrontato nel corso di questo festival, sia oggi in particolare nel tema che affrontiamo con il professor David LEISER, israeliano, professore di psicologia economica all'Università Ben Gurion, e professore che è specializzato in economia psicologica e in psicologia sociale, e che è autore di un libro, senior author, con Jonathan Shemesh, junior author, dal titolo How We Misunderstand Economics and Why It Matters, The Psychology of Bias, Distortion and Conspiracy, ossia come equivochiamo, non comprendiamo l'economia e perché ciò è importante, la psicologia dei pregiudizi, delle distorsioni e della cospirazione. Lo affronta il professor LEISER dal punto di vista della psicologia cognitiva, quindi dei processi che stanno alla base di questa comprensione talora e spesso, insomma, anche superficiale, e ci porta un po' a cercare di capire in che situazione ci troviamo con una teoria, io la definirei così naturalmente, dell'equivoco economico, proprio perché c'è la tendenza a un approccio limitato, superficiale, nei meccanismi cognitivi dell'individuo, che in modo sistematico tendono a darci una lettura superficiale nella quale si interpreta una situazione economica come ad esempio la scarsità di reddito, la mancanza di lavoro, sovrastimando e immaginando cause indirette per spiegare gli effetti concreti e reali. Da ciò che cosa nasce? Nasce appunto poi anche la distorsione per cui si tende ad attribuire delle colpe a chi si vede in una situazione più felice. E nella società attuale ipertecnologica l'impatto diventa straordinario e diventa un'onda fortissima. L'economia invece e ogni vicenda economica è assolutamente complessa. Di questo ci parla naturalmente il professor LEISER e quindi ci spiega meglio quello che, qui lo dico in senso giornalistico un po', intendiamo di solito come la pancia, no? Quando diciamo si va di pancia, ecco. Forse più che la pancia c'è un meccanismo a volte appunto cognitivo anche di difesa, di lettura rapida e solo superficiale delle cose. Occorre fare molto di più per riuscire a comprendere la situazione. È qui che viene poi il punto, ovviamente. Io rispetto alla pancia e a questa lettura, insomma, di LEISER che mi attendo di cogliere nella sua complessità, chiaramente, perché chi ci dice che è complessa la situazione ce lo enuncerà attraverso anche una teoria un po' complessa, chiaramente. Credo che ci possa fare un po' da cornice e spiegare la situazione anche una frase antica che possiamo ritagliare dall'introduzione al Principe di Machiavelli e che vi riporto qui perché, come dire, ci aiuta sempre a tenere desta l'attenzione su come i processi economici si legano anche ai processi politici. A conoscere bene la natura dei popoli bisogna essere principe, ed a conoscere bene quella dei principi bisogna essere popolare. Quindi c'è un legame tra consenso e lettura poi anche dei fatti che è fondamentale. Il passaggio è quale formazione e quale informazione, come costruirla. Su questo punto, naturalmente, arriveremo in conclusione con il professor LEISER. Grazie.
Grazie a lei. Thank you, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be again in Trento. I have come a number of times here, and this is a particularly important meeting for me because I usually speak in front of a professional, advanced audience, and the whole point of my book is really to think together about what might be the better way of getting people who are interested, who care about things, and at the same time are not professionals, and to improve the relationship and the connection between those and the professionals. At the introductory meeting, Professor Tito Boeri has asked us to present complicated idea in a simple and accessible way, and this has been something of my attempt here. So I will begin by showing you a very quick, video showing a meeting between a member of the public and a number of professional economists, some of whom you might even identify. No sound. Oh, well. Could we get the sound, please? I've got £10 in my pocket. If I go out and buy 3 pints of beer in Cambridge, this is not working. I will have to supplement. The sound is not working? Yeah, thank you. I'm so. Yeah. All right.
So much time arguing amongst themselves about the problem. Economics is
yes. All right. Now we can begin. Let's try again.
Politicians spend so much time arguing amongst themselves about the problem. Economics is really simple. I've got £10 in my pocket. If I go out and buy 3 pints of beer in Cambridge, I'm probably borrowing money. If I carry on doing that, then I'm going to run out of money and I'm going to go bust. It's not difficult, guys. Just sit down, work out what the country needs to do and work collectively
because the
together.
Country does not operate as your budget does.
We have a budget.
But why not? Why not? Why? Politicians spend so...
So let's summarize what we have here. We have somebody who came to meet economists in Cambridge, and he says, well, economics is really simple. And he explains that, well, you know, the country is just like your home, and same reasoning apply. To which an economist, in this case this was Yanis Varoufakis, says the country does not operate the way your budget does. No explanation. He is very annoyed. Why not? Why not? Things are so simple. It's not difficult, guys. Just get together and do it. That's the way he feels it. And then he got that, we didn't hear that bit, but do you have the person who says there, Well, you know, in a country, total expenditure equals total income, which to any economist is a very basic idea, but it's totally unhelpful to that person. So we have here a dialogue that totally collapsed. And so we have a mutual incomprehension. On the one hand, the public does not understand why don't politicians take commonsensical measures about which I will be talking, and if they don't, well, maybe they have ulterior motives. Maybe there are hidden things there, and I begin to be suspicious of them. On the other hand, the economists are frustrated. Why doesn't the public why doesn't the public understand obvious facts and their consequences? Well, they don't because they're not economists. You studied for many years, and they didn't. So don't come and complain. Also, don't say, oh, it's really too bad, we didn't explain it well. It's not just a matter of explaining well. I will show you that the roots of misunderstanding are very deep, and in order to overcome those difficulties, well, you need a lot of training, or you need something else, but you cannot expect somebody just giving a little fire chat talk and everything will become clear. It will not, and I will show you that in great detail now. Here are examples of obvious steps. Price caps. Prices are getting too high, maybe rentals are getting too expensive. Well, very simple. We impose a law that from now on you cannot rent for more than this and that amount. Or, well, wages are too low. We say, well, there's a minimum wage. It's still too low. We raise the minimum wage. I'm not saying any of those things are bad ideas. I'm just saying these are the obvious steps. It's not the same. We need a balanced budget. That sounds very reasonable. That's what that gentleman in Cambridge was just saying. If I spend more than I earn, then I'm going to get into trouble. Economists say, well, it doesn't work like that. Because the economy doesn't work like your home. And he goes, why not? Trade protectionism. We know, for example, in the person of Donald Trump, he has very specific ideas about how commerce should function, and it's causing a great deal of damage. And economists will tell you that we are no longer in the 17th century, and we understand a few things about commerce that everyday understanding does not carry. So what's the basis of the problem? The problem is that we were not born to live in the 21st century with a complex market economy. Our forefathers were meant to live in small communities with simple economies, and our mental makeup is attuned to that. We, for example, are fantastic at understanding other people. We understand people, we understand the motivations. If I see somebody who is now frowning, I say, okay, that person is not really convinced by what I'm saying. We are great at that. We understand mechanics. If I were to drop my glass or something, we know just what will happen. We are good at that. We're meant to work in that kind of a world. We are no good at understanding quantum mechanics. Nobody does. You really have to become a physicist and study mathematics, and even then you don't have that many intuitions. And we are good to understand biology because, well, we live around animals. Those can be animals that like dogs, or they can be like scorpions. Doesn't matter. We try to understand, and we are good at that. But in the modern world, well, we seem to be. Okay, I was just saying that such models may not always be correct, but they serve us well enough. Now, in the modern world, there are new domains. And there are certain places where they study public understanding of X, where X can be climate change, ecology, vaccination, science, because it all has real-world consequences. Here is Trump saying, climate change, definitely a hoax. Now, 99.99% of scientists say, no, it's not a hoax, it's terrible, and it's happening. Well, doesn't believe it. Economics is a crucially important case because so much of our political activity turns around economics. Ultimately, all of it does because stuff costs money. Here's then Trump, but he's not alone. We have, well, we have the Brexit. We have, well, the Gilets jaunes in Paris. We have, in Italy, Mr. Salvini. Now, the thing is, public understanding in any domain is poor. But economics is extra hard because, here is my claim, the main claim, there is a mismatch between our cognitive endowment on the one hand and the principles of economic thought, and I'll try to make it as clear as I can in a presentation, which will be, I have to say already now, it will be, if you know the TED style, if you know the TED, it's going to be a little in the style of TED because it's the most effective way of giving ideas shortly, but people who are interested in hearing more are invited to get the book, where there are like 500 references and it's very scholarly and very everything, but you get the main idea from here. You don't have to buy the book, really, although I would love you to. So why is economics so hard? Two sides to it, the size of the subject, that of the object. On the side of the subject, and we'll present them seriatim, on the side of the subject, we have human cognitive limitations that I will describe briefly, and on the side of the object, I will describe how economic thought proceeds. And we'll see, it doesn't match. So, on the one hand, we have some kind of a primate, well, a human really, but not really your university student. On the right hand, we have an iconic graph that represents the supply and demand, representing here basic ideas in economics. And there's a misunderstanding, and that's what happened. You have a big question mark because the fellow on the left does not understand what's written on the blackboard on the right. So let's begin with the subject. I will ask the subject to step 4. Yeah, thank you. So here we have the subject, and it is common to think of our knowledge and intelligence in terms of a flashlight or of a light. I can direct it, it lights, but let's observe two things about that. The one is that the beam of a light has its limitation. It goes that far, and for all I know, there might be a line behind that, but I never will know. Well, I'll know when it's too late, but I won't be able to see it. It's too far. And our intelligence, our thought, does not go far enough. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that the beam has a certain breadth, a certain width. And what's beyond that is not caught. So if I may, this is, say, cognitive psychology in 20 seconds, we have, on the one hand, long-term memory. That's where all our knowledge resides. Everything we know, and we know an awful lot, and the older we get, the more we know, and it's all adds up there. Some is forgotten, but there's a lot of stuff. And the thing is, it's not very easily accessed. In fact, the scope of what we do, the breadth of that light there, is very narrow. And all kinds of relevant stuff may not be accessible to us. It's there, but it's not accessed by the question at hand. And I'll show you that. The other thing is what's called short-term memory, and this refers to how many thinking steps we are able to do on a given issue. Willing, able, how much we do. Take an example. Suppose you have, I have a metaphor. Suppose there's a water pipe that explodes, water coming out, and I have to do something because the water is pouring on the floor. So I can go to my attic. That would be the long-term memory. And I look, and there's a lot of stuff there, a lot of junk, and it's not orderly. Our long-term memory is not a library. It's like an attic. Plenty of stuff. So I train my light over there, and there's something that doesn't look very promising, and meanwhile the water is still pouring, so I go somewhere else and say, oh, here I found something, and I go there, and I pick it up, and I solve my problem. Sorry. This is the way this is the way we typically do things. So let me give you an example of a narrow scope. People are being asked every year by the Pew Center, Research Center, should spending on X be increased, decreased, or stay the same according to you, where X can be social security, healthcare, national defense, education, you know, everything that's important. And when you ask people, do you think we should increase spending on healthcare? People say yes. And if you ask them, do you think that social security should be increased? Definitely. And do you believe national defense? Oh, yes, we need that. How about education? I'm in favor. Okay. Now, if you mention that, well, this might require tax increases, people suddenly are not so sure that they want that. Now, the point is, I want you to pay attention to the issue here. Of course, people know that the money has to come from somewhere. Two ways. Either you spend more on one, but then you spend less on the other, or you get some more money. Those are the only possibilities. The thing is, people don't spontaneously think like that. Basically, what they do is they support funding program based on their perceived worthiness, considered in isolation. What's called opportunity cost is ignored. That's my scope of access. The other thing is about short-sighted policy. Here is Éric Piolle. He is the mayor of Grenoble, a very fine man, I'm not joking. And he has a good idea, just last week, 2 weeks ago. He says, well, people sometimes are thrown away by the landlord because they don't pay salary. They don't pay their rent. Well, let's have a bylaw, that is a municipal law. Let's make it their responsibility of the landlord to find an alternative place. Now, if you think about it, if I have to rent to someone, I will not take somebody who may possibly have a problem. And therefore, those people will have even more problem than they do at the present. And in general, the purpose, we have to just think one more step. And this really very fine person, he didn't become mayor of a big city in France for nothing. He really blew it. In Beersheba, that's where my university is located, we, meaning the municipality, wanted to attract people to the old town. It's not nearly as beautiful as in Trento, but it's nice and it would be good for tourism and so forth. So the idea was, here is one obvious solution. Let's give artists money to move there. Now, this is an idea that comes to somebody with a head as small as this young fellow here. Because let's think about it. What was the effect of giving help to artists to live in the center of Beersheba city? Well, there's more money for renters, but there's more demand then, but there's still the same supply. Therefore, surprise, surprise, higher prices. And so you have an equilibrium with higher prices, which in addition are making life difficult to the artists who are already there, because the average rental was higher even for the people who are already there. So a total mess. And it's not just in Beersheba city. You might say, well, a provincial town, what do they know? Here is Ms. Kamala Harris. She's a Democrat senator and a presidential contender, and again, a very fine and smart legislator. But she has another idea. Rentals shouldn't be much higher than, you shouldn't be spending more than 30% on your rental. That's really not a good idea. Our solution? Well, very simple. Let the federal government reimburse household for rent that is over 30% of household income. Now, you're getting the gist of the idea here. Increase demand, same housing supply, prices will rise. Who will benefit? The landlords. Because people were willing to pay $2,000 and now it will be even worse. People will say, well, since I will get reimbursed for anything that's below a third of my salary, well, I can rent a mansion. What do I care? They'll pay. Well, it's really crazy. But again, everybody here follows my argument. It's not a difficult argument, but it doesn't come to mind. And that's typical. And the government will, of course, lose billions because she wants that to be nationwide. Oops, sorry. So simplistic policies are framed too narrowly. They don't encompass all relevant variables. They don't trace indirect and feedback consequences. What they just do is they push in the direction opposite to the presenting symptom. We want people to pay less, to spend less, let's give them money. Here are some examples. Cheap imports have depressed domestic wages. Let's impose tariffs. Wages are too low, minimal wages. Rentals are too high, rental caps. We are talking about direct and simplistic as opposed to a broader perspective that an economist would use. Well, you can improve education. You can improve the infrastructure. You can develop sectors with competitive advantage. It used to be that something like 60%, I believe, of Israeli export in the 50s were oranges. But with education, with infrastructure, then what we export is mostly very high value added items of all kinds. Computer ideas, technology. Provide alternate investment opportunities so people will not want to make so much money out of existing houses. Well, so here are some examples of populist solutions and their justifications, and I'll move on to some additional ideas here. Minimum wages. Why do we want to give minimum wages? Because they need the money. Well, makes sense. Lower the retirement age because, well, people have worked enough, which is not false. Distribute money to the people because, well, people need money. No problem with that, really, as such. But here is an example of what happens. There's an important study that was completed about 2 years ago in Seattle, that's in Washington State, in the United States, where they imposed minimum wage and higher minimum wages. The thing that happened is that if you force, for example, restaurant owners to pay more to the person who cleans the table and to the person who chops the vegetables, well, restaurants will find ways to save money. For example, you know what, you go to many restaurants, they ask you to return your tray. Nobody has to be paid. Problem solved. Cutting vegetables very cheaply, but it's now costing me more. Well, suddenly there's a factory that springs up in Mexico, it's a true case, where they say, we'll send you cut vegetables. We pay our Mexican workers much less, and you don't have to pay anybody. And then that's very convenient. You get every day, you get fresh vegetables brought by plane, good quality, and it comes out cheaper than the new price. Result is that there are fewer low-paying jobs, and also, interestingly, and not expectedly, but if you think about it, it gets difficult to get a low-paying job. You are a 17-year-old, you don't want to go to school, you want to work. Nobody's going to give you work because the rate will be too high. And it's spread also. Everybody can now buy a vegetable from Mexico, and the factories there can grow and grow so that we lose jobs for everybody. All those things are indirect consequences that don't really come to mind. I'll show you a few more things here. One is about changing the age of retirement. There's such a thing called dependency ratio. Everybody in Italy, the way the pension system works here, doesn't work the same everywhere, is that everybody pays for other people, a proportion of other people. So you have those persons walking around, and they carry on their back other people, which are partly older people and partly young kids who don't make money. This is called the dependency ratio, is how many people, or what proportion of a person, do you carry on your back as a working person. Now the dependency ratio, if you look at it on the right, is predicted to increase from 48 to, that is, 1.5 person per working person, to 87 over the next 30 years or so. So what we have here is a very interesting contrast of the way of thinking. One of them, I look at that fellow here and I said, come on, he has worked enough. He deserves to rest. Who knows how long he will live even, and whether he'll be able to enjoy his retirement. You focus on the individual because that's our psychology. But economists say, well, we can't just look at that fellow. We have to look at everybody, the proportion of working and not working people, and how this is set to evolve in the coming years. Entirely different construction of reality. There is an effect called the identified victim effect. You may never have thought about it, but you certainly encountered. When, say, in the newspaper, they want you to provide many, for example, children who have fled from Syria, they don't give you statistics because we don't feel statistics. They show you that girl, Rana, that's her. Look, poor girl. She exists, and she needs the food. But the communication is built by people who understand psychology, and it is geared to make us emote. And the number of people that we can continue and look at that, the emotion drops down like this, very quickly. We don't care much about, well, 10 people is already a statistic. 5 people is almost a statistic. 1 person, that's the thing. 2, all right, don't go much beyond. So the pictures show you always 1 or 2 person. Usually 1 person, that's the best. That was the subject aspect. Now I want to talk about the object aspect. One of the main economists of previous century explained that economy does not give you a solution. It's a technique of thinking. And I want to describe this. Lay people, as I said just now with the example I gave, think of individuals, their goals, their intentions, and their choices. We are talking about individual drops. Economists think of the aggregate. They think of the lay of the land, and they try to predict the trajectory, and they don't really care about an individual drop. Well, they care about the individual drop because they are humans like everybody else, and they want individual drops to be well, but they think about what's called the aggregate, the collection, the collective thing, and that's what they use to think about it. And indeed, they don't even consider one path of waterfall, they try to consider the entire hydraulic system. This is my prettiest slide, so I hope you like it. It's in South America. So what are the, yes, exactly. So here are the aspects on which economists concentrate and others don't. They look at direct and indirect effect and feedback. They look at the aggregate, and they think of equilibrium. And I will illustrate that with an example not from the economy, but that will bring the point home. How many of you have heard about lemmings and their suicidal tendencies? Some people have, thank you. There is a story that goes that will, you know, what happened is that lemmings, these are little rodents living in Antarctica, and their population has wild fluctuations. And then there's a story that goes that from time to time, lemmings are taken by some kind of a collective suicidal urge, and they go west, and then they jump to their deaths to the frozen waters of the Pacific Ocean. Which there's even a movie by Walt Disney called The Frozen Desert that explained that was done in the 50s, and the speaker has a nice baritone voice saying, taken by some whatever. So, well, you remember the style. Now, the thing is, well, here's a picture of the lemmings, a drawing of the lemmings jumping, and the reason it's a drawing is because there are no photographs, and there are no photographs because, well, it doesn't happen. I'll explain what happens to the lemmings as a metaphor for many kinds of cases of thinking in economics. I believe it will be illuminating. Imagine a little world, an island, say, where there are only 3 creatures. There's grass, there are rabbits, and there are foxes. And now, of course, rabbits will eat grass and foxes eat rabbits. Such is life. Now imagine that the quantity of grass increases. What will happen to the population of rabbits and of foxes, for example? Well, more grass means more rabbits, sorry, and more rabbits mean actually less grass. Then also, of course, more rabbits mean more foxes, which mean, well, you got it, less rabbits, which mean more grass, which means at this point your head starts spinning and you say, well, I don't understand what is going to happen here. And this is the type of thing that for those who have any mathematical knowledge, you solve that by something called differential equation, and specifically the Lotka-Volterra differential equation, Volterra being an Italian, Lotka an Austrian. I can show you what happens. So you have then the population of the rabbit that goes like this. And why does it go? It seems to have moved here. Sorry. But the population of, okay, I'll just show it here, then something is off. Sorry, stop it. Right, so what happens is, as the population of foxes increases, population of rabbits drops. As it drops, then of course foxes don't have anything to eat, so their population drops, which allows the population of rabbits to increase, and therefore you have a fluctuation. Another possibility that happens even more often if you try to play with that game on the internet is that very likely the fox will eat the rabbits and then they'll die because they won't have anything to eat, and you'll have an island with plenty of grass and nothing else. That happens typically, but it can come to an equilibrium, and economists look for such equilibria. No, what? Okay. So this is how many economic explanation works. Indirect links, feedback, aggregation, equilibrium. And in fact, there is a picture. There is a picture, a photograph from the movie. I said there was none, but I lied. There is one, but this was from the movie, but you have to know, don't know how you feel about Walt Disney in general, but that picture was taken because the nice people on the set threw the lemmings in the water in order to photograph them. God bless their souls. Well, anyway, but they needed that explanation, which is an explanation in terms of individuals. Individual little creatures, for some unexplained ID, want to commit suicide. And when they all do, at the same time, then there's a drop. The real explanation is what's called population dynamics, what I just showed you with the rabbits and the things and going up and down. That's the real explanation, that if you don't have access to that kind of explanation, because we are not really built for that, well, we end up by saying, well, it's all intentional, and hence that 1950s movies. Oh, shoot. So we have really a road less traveled, that of population dynamics, and both people who have an intentionality idea explaining the population drop by intentionality. Same thing goes for, how much more time do I have, do you think? Sorry? Oh, that is very short. So I will have to stop. So I will ask, how do people really manage? And I have to do that rather quickly. There are several ways they can do it. One of them is by personality traits. People don't really, Paolo described before, the gut feeling. Well, this is what we're talking about. We ask people, do you think that the economy is, and stability in crisis, do you think that the economy is fundamentally sound and it will restore itself after occasional crises? Or do you think it's gradual? Well, this deterioration doesn't happen very fast. Or do you think that up to a point it's okay, but beyond that point it will collapse? Or again, do you think it's chaotic? You cannot understand that stuff, and things happen, and who knows? And then also one that says it's always very tricky, very dangerous. It's finely balanced. At any point it can collapse. We asked that question.
Why she had to go, I don't know, she wouldn't say. I said something wrong, now I long for yesterday.
For those of you who haven't heard of the Beatles, this is a song where a young man explained that yesterday life was great, he had his girlfriend, they were happy, everything was going just fine, life was such an easy game to play. And then I said something wrong, just said a word, I don't know what I said something wrong, and now she took her stuff and she left, and now I long for yesterday. Of course, we have to be aware that we get only the story of the young man. I'm sure that if we had the lady, she would have some explanation why it happened, and okay, but in any event, we ask questions about relationship, the same one we ask about economy. And we ask the questions about health. And we ask the same questions about climate, like climate is stable or you can push it but not beyond the point, and relationship at any time. For this man there, well, you know, it's chaotic, you don't know, everything was fine, and I said something wrong, and all gone. We are talking about his perception, right? And same about the economy. Economists have their ideas, but the public thinks from their gut, as you mentioned. And I can show it, because this is technical, and I'm just showing it to show off, but this is a factor analysis that shows that people have the same beliefs in all 4 domains. If you are the kind of person who thinks that the economy is about to collapse any moment, and your relationships are totally unsafe, and so forth, and the climate the same, and what was the 4th one? Health. I mean, like, you feel perfectly fine, then you go to sleep. You feel that you feel perfectly fine, and you go to sleep, and you wake up the following morning dead. Well, those things are highly correlated, which really means that people, when you ask them what will happen to the economy, they don't derive it from some significant meaning of the economy. No way. What they do, if they are stressed people, then they say, yeah, it can collapse any moment. If you are laid back, say, well, things will be okay, then everything will be okay. Relationship, health, everything will be okay. So this is not one of the sources that allow people to say. I want to quickly, another thing is ideology. Ideology is fine, because if you adhere to an ideology, then of course you know what to think. You've been told by other people. I will move quickly. Another one is an interesting point. About I have 5 more minutes, apparently. So another thing. Yeah, sorry. Another thing is we ask people about many variables, 19 variables in economics. If one of them goes up, what will happen to the other? And people say systematically, well, they are usually willing to answer. And the way people manage, I mean, it's really crazy. How do people presume to tell you what happens if the money supply increases? Will consumer debt or the depth of the recession increase or decrease? How do people presume to answer? They really don't know. How do they do that? Well, they have a trick, turns out, and it was now shown extensively here in Trento, actually, by an economist colleague, and also in Australia with a very large data set. The way people work is basically they divide everything in good and bad. Think that when they increase, it's good. When it increases, they're bad. And their idea is good things go together, bad things go together. So if A and B belongs to the same goal, same pole, good or bad, increasing one would increase the other, and mutatis the other if it goes down. I call that the good begets good heuristic. From which follow, for example, that for people, inflation is bad, unemployment is bad, therefore, and when inflation goes up, unemployment goes up, which every economist will tell you is crazy. Doesn't work like that at all for good reasons. But that's what people believe in their vast quantities. I will just move on and want to show you something about politics now. One of them, is the first thing, the following. There is a classic trade-off. When you reduce interest rate, people and companies can spend more, and that will facilitate growth. Or you can fight inflation by raising rate. Money will be expensive, people will borrow less money, they will have less money to spend, and then inflation will reduce. It's one or the other, it's a trade-off. Naive people, lay people, are not usually aware of trade-offs. They don't really believe in them. I show that at length in the book. Here's an example. Mr. Erdogan, a few weeks, well, March 2nd, but also already a few years back, said, well, we have now inflation at 90%. We don't deserve this. Inshallah, inflation will fall again to 6 or 7%. We don't deserve it. Turkey has to cut interest rates, or the problem with high inflation will persist. He doesn't know in economics, and when he speaks with the governor of his central bank, and the government says, no, we can't do that, that's really wrong, he says, shut up, because he's an autocrat. So when you have people like that who are in power and are clueless, well, the naive, everyday understanding of economics, well, it applies to national policy. And the Turkish lira collapsed. Other example. So why is that? Because for them, the good begets good. Weather can be fair or weather can be bad. And all the bad things go together. So the goals, growth, low inflation, are to be pursued jointly. The right economic policy will get the economy back on track. Everything will be fine, which is madness. But it's not obvious madness. It's actually understandable if you don't understand economics. We have metaphors which are, I will not have time to go about, but here we have also Mike Pence, Vice President of the United States, who just last week, I believe, May 2nd, well, a little more, the economy is roaring. This is the time not only to not raise interest rates, but we ought to consider cutting them. Okay, that's another one. And I mean, I spend my time reading newspaper and say, oh my God, oh my God. So what we have then is the following. The public, people behave according to their lives. And Schiller, Nobel Prize winner, says economics should be expanded to include study of how people understand, basically. That's what Schiller says. He has a book coming out now soon. Rulers, especially authoritarian rulers, are not always conversant with economic thinking. I brought Erdogan, but he's far from being the only one. Many legislators, say, for example, are not like that, and they may promote policies consonant with lay thinking. And then politicians. There's that great quote by Jean-Claude Juncker. We all know what to do, we just don't know how to get re-elected after we've done it. And therefore, we have to be very careful. So they are influenced by the public, not because they do know better, but, well, they have to be re-elected. And there's a quote here by Elsa Fornero, who in her recent book says economic financial literacy is a key ingredient for pension reforms. You cannot change, well, every Italian knows that. You cannot have pension reform the way she tried to do if the public doesn't follow. Just like that, well, it's a democracy after all. Sorry? Up to a point, I understand, yes. So, now I want to come to populism. Cass Muddle, who was here the other day, society is separated into two groups. You've heard those who came to several conferences know that. The pure people and the corrupt elite. A populist leader who gets into power has to be in a permanent campaign to convince his people that he is not establishment and never will be. Nadia Urbinati, who also spoke here the other day. Michael Gove, who is the one candidate now for becoming conservative head. Britain has had enough of experts. And then he's another, it's a novel phenomenon, but in France already older. Coluche is a stand-up comedian who says, technocrats, those are the guys that when you ask them a question, by the time they are finished answering, you don't understand the question you ask anymore. I believe everybody can identify with that. So we have all those ways. We have the public misunderstanding translate into behavior. The misunderstanding by rulers, mainly authoritarian, affects behavior. Politicians make allowance for public understanding, and they use some mediocre policies to not be totally wrong, but also make the people happy. And then you have the populists who have to identify. If they start talking like those technocrats, they become the elite. And then they lose their credibility. So this is the summary. We are you, we are the people. And this is then the book. Ta-da! And if you want to read more, to see more about the book, here's a site where you can get information about the book. And with that, I am totally open to discussion.
Allora, grazie naturalmente, professor LEISER. Faccio una domanda, poi apriamo, dopo la sua risposta, apriamo il dibattito appunto con il pubblico. E la domanda è questa, da una breve considerazione. Dalla sua relazione, professor LEISER, abbiamo avuto una sorta di fenomenologia della pancia, no? Di come agiamo di pancia, perché abbiamo questa percezione ristretta dal punto di vista della conoscenza. Dopo la sua illustrazione viene da chiedersi se questo problema rimane e rimarrà, se c'è un divario tale tra la conoscenza reale, approfondita e che richiede appunto una complessità, o se dovremo convivere sempre con questo pericolo del mal di pancia e della pancia che sceglie. E quindi la domanda diventa: è possibile una formazione, informazione che gradatamente aggiusti un po' questa divaricazione, questa distanza, oppure semplicemente dovremo sperare che certe cose vadano in un modo, tendere all'ottimismo e alla fiducia verso appunto chi può risolvere le cose, tenendo in considerazione nei dati che formano l'equilibrio attorno all'aggregato che c'è anche la pancia da considerare ogni volta.
This question is really about what's called in English the elephant in the room. Namely, there's a big problem. Yes? Oh, maybe I can hear something here. Yeah, so elephant in the room. There's a big issue and nobody wants to talk about it. The elephant in the room is that, well, really, people don't understand. It's just a fact. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm telling you that's the way it is. And now the issue is, if we want a democratic country, which we all do, what can we do? And I believe, first of all, we have to be lucid and clear. We have to know that certain things can be explained and other things cannot be explained, and accept that. That's just a fact of life. That also is true in other domains, but in the economic domain, it's just a fact of life. You cannot really understand economic policy if you are not an economist. At the same time, of course, we do want the goals of the politicians to translate what we really care about. And so I think, first of all, this is a little pro domo, but I think we should do studies about what people can and cannot understand. My book is devoted to that, but I only have scratched the surface. There's much, much more that needs to be done. And then for those things that cannot be explained, well, they cannot be explained, but there's something that you can do, especially you mentioned education. I'm now working with a colleague, not sure if she's here, Carmela Aprea from Mannheim University. We are trying to develop a program not to teach economics, but to teach appreciation for the complexities of economic choices. And that can be done. It can be done in high school. We have a good platform to do so. And I believe that's a first and important thing that can be done. Trying to help people understand that, well, not speak like the first man, well, economics is really simple. No, it's not simple. And many things have to be taken into account. So we can develop in youth, in students, an appreciation for complexity. At least they will not jump to the first solution and says, well, that's the first one I thought about, so surely that's the only one. Another thing that can be done, and I had a little quote there from Elsa Fornero. She is a one-man show now. She's traveling throughout Italy in small towns and meeting the people and discussing with them. And I believe that's really, I really am full of admiration for that woman's work. No feeling of superiority, just meeting the people and say, I want you to understand what we're trying to do. Because I think many people of the public, it has to be proven, but my hunch, my intuition is that people don't realize what a policy is. from them, it's like the Tsar who would just decide randomly after having drunk the whole night, saying, well, tomorrow everybody has to pay 5% more taxes. Why? Because I'm the boss. But in reality, that's not how it works. For example, those pension reforms take into consideration intergenerational justice, and take into consideration present population, and take into consideration any number of things, which have to be finely balanced, and it's perfectly legitimate to argue whether this or that solution is the best one, whether they got the balance right, and maybe your politicians you want them to push on something else. That's fine, but at least have an understanding that those things are complicated, and not complicated in the sense you cannot understand them, but that there are trade-offs. Economy is really the science of trade-off. Limited means, unlimited needs, you need to trade off. And that's something that people have to understand. Thank you.
Grazie. Domande dal pubblico. Ecco, arriviamo subito con il microfono, chiaramente, perché sia possibile.
So David, that was a fascinating talk. Having been in economics for half a century, I think you made a lot of things clear. Where I would mildly like to modify what you're saying is that you talk about economics as if it basically is an established consensus on which the economics profession agrees. And I would fully accept the fact that about, say, 80%, and almost everything you mentioned, there's a fair amount of agreement amongst economists. But I think it would probably help us convince others that we are not these aloof experts if we admitted the things on which economics basically has no answer. For instance, what should be the relative size of the public sector and the private sector in a capitalist economy? What is the kind of income distribution that you would like to see? And why is it that certain obvious predictions that economics makes actually aren't borne out by the facts? For instance, a naive economist would argue that in a democracy, nobody should go out and vote because the probability that your vote makes any difference is, of course, negligible, and so there's a cost to voting, everybody should stay home. But people don't, and people leave tips in restaurants that they never go back to. There are things we do that don't seem to fully accord with the postulates of standard economics. And it probably would be good for the standing of the profession in the general public if we were a little bit modest about what we know and what we don't know.
Thank you. Okay.
Complimenti professore. Due citazioni filosofiche. Sono qua. Friedrich Hegel, filosofo tedesco, ai primi dell'Ottocento sviluppò la filosofia del negativo, cioè lui vedeva il processo storico dell'umanità come un processo di catastrofi, come i lemmings. Erano incapaci di trovare, l'uomo deve passare per una catastrofe per capire la lezione. Platone, 2000 anni prima, ha visto il crollo della democrazia ateniese, propose il governo dei filosofi. Lei sembra dirci questo, sembra dirci fidatevi, popoli, fidatevi più dei tecnici che dei politici. Dobbiamo ricucire un rapporto di conoscenza fra tecnici e popolo, perché i politici fanno solo danni. Come facciamo? E i tecnici sono tutti d'accordo, che è un po' la domanda del precedente? Grazie.
Well, several important points here. One is economists don't all agree, but they think at the right level. And what I mean is thinking at the level of the individual is not a good way to direct policy, because there is a causality in economics that is only at the level of the aggregate. So to that extent, there may be disagreement, and it's fine that there should be disagreement, and you may or may not share that with the public, and that's something else. But at least, as opposed to the general public, yes, there is a difference. Second thing, I don't know how many of you listened yesterday to John Bercow, the Speaker of the House, He gave a fantastic talk. He's the man who goes order at the beginning of every session of the parliament. And he described, he gave a plea for the way democracy, parliamentary democracy works, where you trust your politicians, you don't presume to know as much as they know, and you let them do it. So if you don't have trust, everything goes down. But just last week, I was invited in the Ministry of Finance in Israel to address a whole branch of the thing there, people in charge of salaries, really. And they said, well, you know, when we have to negotiate salaries of teachers and of social workers, well, then I always get a very bad press, and what should I do about it? And I said, well, when there is a crisis, there's nothing you can do about it. For the public, there are good guys and bad guys, and what can I tell you? You're not one of the good guys. But there's no reason for you to come to the public only at those times. In fact, you want the public. I know many people in the finance ministry in various branches, and I'm sure there may be some illegal or devious things happening too, but basically people are hard-working people who try to optimize any number of policies for the benefit of the people. So I say you should let people know. Every corporation spends a lot of money to improve its image. Now, it's not just a matter, regarding economics, it's not just a matter of sending a pretty girl and that is going to smile or having a very funny cartoon. You have to understand the public in order to know what the message is, and once you have done that study, then you can give it to a publicity company to try to make it attractive. So my point really briefly is certain things, you do all I told him, you do all kinds of good things. People have no idea what you're doing. People don't even know you are doing anything. For them, you just have random decisions. Explain to people when nobody's shouting, when there's no strike waiting, explain to them quietly what you are trying to do and how you try to balance various interests. And then you gain trust. And once you gain trust, then when you have to do things that are technical and harder to understand, maybe, just maybe, they will trust you as well. Of course, this is a thing that works very differently in different countries. I can't think that in Ukraine this is going to work because everybody is convinced that the government is totally corrupt, and they are probably not so wrong. Other places, it works differently. In Israel, I think it would work pretty well. There's a good sense that the ministry is doing a good job, and so if they explain more, they'll get more credit. In Italy, I don't know, you tell me.
Prego.
Buongiorno. In Italia, diciamo, se uno non fa gli studi economici, diciamo, rimane completamente ignorante in fatto di economia. Questo è risaputo, quindi c'è un'ignoranza economica, penso, molto, molto alta. E, diciamo, chi vuole capirci un po' di più o fa da solo, oppure... Io per esempio personalmente ho imparato molte cose da solo e poi all'università della terza età. Ecco, e a volte però si incontrano difficoltà tali per cui viene da dubitare che magari gli economisti la mettano giù, diciamo, un po' più dura, nel senso facciano un po' diciamo ostruzionismo sul fatto che l'economia sia veramente possibile essere compresa a livello anche sufficiente dalla gente, no? Sembra quasi che ci sia un interesse a non far capire alla gente, soprattutto dal punto di vista anche finanziario, no? Della moneta, diciamo, della stampa della moneta, del circolo della moneta, diciamo, ecco. Grazie.
Okay, quindi questo problema, insomma, anche delle categorie che tendono a rimanere anche in un linguaggio, peraltro, che dà minor accesso, no? Mi pare di capire.
Certo, potrebbero, io vedo nel mio piccolo all'università della terza età un bravo professore riesce veramente a trasferire a gente anche che non ha mai fatto studi economici, riesce a trasferire, se vuole, in modo comprensivo molti concetti anche diciamo difficili, ecco. Quindi è solo una questione di volontà.
Grazie. Professore, non so, ci sono altre domande? Ecco, ce n'è un'altra qua, la raccogliamo anche questa. Può alzare la mano di nuovo, che così... Ecco qua.
Mi ricollego a quello che ha detto il signore prima. Sono d'accordo con il professore quando parla di comprendere la complessità dell'economia, perché secondo me è difficile arrivare a comprendere la teoria economica. Ma vorrei soltanto spostare l'attenzione sui prodotti finanziari assicurativi per dire quale discrasia vi sia tra il prodotto e la comprensione del prodotto per chi risparmia. Noi ci fermiamo sempre sulla analisi delle crisi finanziarie, ma non comprendiamo come attraverso i prodotti giorno per giorno c'è uno spostamento di ricchezza reale dal risparmio verso le imprese di assicurazione, le banche e i sistemi finanziari. Ecco, come si può colmare questo iato? Secondo me è impossibile. È impossibile se non delegando a delle strutture che non siano i soliti consigli di amministrazione, istituti di vigilanza, in quanto gli istituti di vigilanza sono catturati dalle imprese, eccetera, ma degli strumenti che facciano gli interessi del risparmio.
Grazie. Allora, vediamo se c'è un'ultima domanda e poi altrimenti eccola là, e poi dopo chiudiamo con le domande perché abbiamo pochissimo tempo, perché poi c'è un altro incontro qua, quindi dobbiamo andare. Grazie.
Well, my first question, are you having a TED Talk? Because I think that would be great for people to, in the 10 minutes, to have a very clear explanation of some things.
It's a good idea, but no, to date I don't.
No, because another question, I think, things have become so complicated in many fields. It's not just economics, but I think the same thing goes for medicine, science in general. The availability of information of all kinds of information is just so very, very fast. What can we do about that? I think to make things, first of all, to make us ready to understand that we don't understand. That's the first thing what you're trying to get through, and getting the messages simple.
Okay, I think I will be able to answer the three questions in one go. Things don't, to begin with your point, products you say are complicated, and that's something that, in Israel at least, is being taken care of by the finance ministry that forces products to become simpler, and they have actually hired me to also simplify the way those things are written. But also the products themselves have to become standardized in many number of ways, making it much more simple to compare things. And also they put a gap on how much money those companies can earn and so forth. This is a matter for regulation because it's, to put it in economic terms, this is not a market. It's not a market because there's asymmetry of information. The ordinary people don't understand, the very big professionals of the companies understand a lot, and therefore they will fool you every day. Therefore, it's not a market where you say, well, let the market decide, we need regulations. And in Israel, this is very advanced, and they are actually hiring people like me to help promote this. So could you just in one word remind me of your question? Yes, please. Yes, I thought I would remember, but... Sorry? No, the TED, okay,
quando parla un tecnico, come diceva, no? Accade questo, che alla fine quando parla non si sa più che domanda gli si era posta, no?
Exactly. Very good.
Now it's difficult for me to repeat the same question, but what I was wondering also, well, I'm not Italian, but I'm not so I understand that I have a difficulty of often understanding the contents of Italian messages, because they are often very complicated and a lot of words to express a simple concept.
Yeah. And this is something.
This is in many fields. It would be very helpful.
It goes also because those documents you read are contracts, and we know that once lawyers have a go at a document, they get very complicated for good, really legal reasons, but it doesn't foster communication. And therefore, there is a way of writing summaries of what really goes on there, and then having in small characters all the small characters that you say, oh, understand, okay, we have to do that. But here is the gist of what you are getting. You are paying that much, you are getting those, paying that much interest, you're getting that covered, in that case, half a page. And that's something that should be insisted on by the legislator to prevent, again, that asymmetry of information. Another thing that I wanted to say is that something that I'm trying to promote, so far without success. If you don't feel well, you can go to the local doctor who will sort of work out what you have and then decide whether you need to see a better specialist or solve your problem, whatever. There's a whole structure put in place by the state or by private companies that make it possible for you to not decide whether you need something, but have somebody competent tell you. What one needs more than anything else, and that goes for several of the questions, is a profession of financial advisors that are forbidden by law from selling anything except their best advice. And then they study all, the same way you do for a lawyer. You go to see a lawyer, you're not going to become a lawyer. Laws are difficult. You tell, here, Mr. Lawyer, here's my problem. What do you recommend? And he'll tell you, or she'll tell you. And the same should go for financial choices. I don't believe it is possible in the modern world that is changing so quickly for ordinary people to manage any more than it is for you to understand the details of a surgical procedure. It's not for you to decide. Go to a professional. But the professional should not be selling you anything, otherwise he'll be in a conflict of interest and it will be even worse. Thank you.
Allora, grazie professor David LEISER. Di sicuro usciamo di qui con una prospettiva più compiuta ma anche più complessa, no? Direi. Quindi questa difficoltà la troveremo continuamente in ogni nostro approccio. Grazie professore, grazie mille.